Hello, good afternoon, everybody. So what we intend to do during this talk is to give you a presentation and an overview of Mobile Connect. But first, let me introduce ourselves. So Najam and myself, we are working for Gemalto. It's an international digital security company with offices worldwide. And we are based in Austin and working in the identity and the security group, and in particular on topics around mobile identity. So this presentation fits in, let's say, our day-to-day lives at work. So first, before going into the deep of the subject, I would like to tell you a little story. So last year I attended LASCON. That was great, like this year. And come October this year, time to register again. So here we go. I received an email with, please, now register for LASCON. So first thing, enter your login and password. So okay, login, it's easy, it's the email address. Passwords, okay, try the first one. Oh, that's not this one. Don't remember since I didn't use it for 1 year. Try a different couple of ones, the one with uppercase, lowercase. And finally, like everybody, click on the forgot password, get the email in the inbox, do all the different steps, and finally got my renew password in there. Good. Now we can register for LASCON. Okay, now I have to re-enter my information, my home address, my credit card information. So basically from an end user perspective, yes, I should not have forgot my password, but if we use it once a year, what can we expect? Not such a great end user experience, and this is a very typical, let's say, experience for end users in everyday life. So this to bring to the point that one of the main 2 pain points that we are going to try to discuss and to resolve during this topic is, one, the multiplicity of credentials. So yes, we have accounts all over the place. So either we use the same password for all of them and then there's really no security. Either we use different passwords and it's a mess to manage all those different credentials. On the other hand, whenever we go to a new website, we have to create a new account, re-enter all this information, and who knows where this information is going to go, how it's going to be shared and used for. So we have 2 major pain points, which are, okay, the management of the credential and the multiplicity of them, and on the other hand, let's say, account creation and how do we sign up for new accounts. So now, if I bring a comparison, when I want to give a phone call, I take my phone, I press the call button, that's it, simple, nothing else to do. So we all forget about password, but nobody forget his phone number. So today we're going to talk about Mobile Connect and see how it brings simplicity in end user experience for these 2 major pain points. So what if I don't need to remember my passwords anymore? No, what if I know when my accounts or my credentials are used? And what if I don't need to enter all my personal information? So let's see if Mobile Connect can answer to those and provide a much better user experience. So during this presentation, we are going to first go through a little overview of existing solution and their limitation for authentication. Then we'll go into Mobile Connect to give an overview and the details of its architecture and what are the different components that are involved into Mobile Connect. We'll bring some example and use cases and some real life video of what it could look like. And finally, we'll discuss the challenges that are brought by Mobile Connect and the deployment of it.
So first, online authentication has been there for some time. So let's look at existing solutions that are out there and their limitations. Passwords, they're the most widely used because they are the least expensive. you know. And inherently, it's just what you know, so it's inherently weak. If it gets stolen, you don't know that somebody else knows your password. How many passwords do you remember? If you make your passwords too strong, it's hard to remember. Whereas if it's too easy, it's very easily broken. So password manager, browser, autofill do help in that sense, but still the weakness is still there. And then you have stronger solutions that are out there. One-time password, PKI, these are token-based solutions. They're very strong, they're very good, but they're not very convenient. I mean, how many tokens can you carry? As Benoit was saying this morning, one guy took out his keychain and he had like tens of tokens in his keychain. So how many do you do? It becomes difficult to manage. PKI, lifecycle management, is a pain. Whoever is working with PKI, we know about that. Then you have out-of-band mobile, where a lot of the banks and providers, what they do, they send an SMS with a code, then you need to put that code into the website to authenticate. It's a strong solution. But in terms of usability, I mean, still it's not very convenient. And then you have apps that are there that the code is sent to the mobile app where you just click, but then it requires a smartphone. And then you have other out-of-band mobile solutions like that. Sometimes, a call is made instead of an SMS where you listen to that code and enter that code. So it's strong, but it's not very convenient. And then you have social login, like you can use Google and Facebook to log into other websites. Very, very convenient, definitely. But not vetted. Anybody can go and open an account on Google and Facebook. So how do you trust the information that the user is given? How do you trust the user? So it's not vetted. And then what about user data? We all realize at some point, you go and register on something, you give your email address. Next thing you realize is you're being, bombarded with spam emails. So how do you control that? And then convenience versus security. Always we see that, if a solution that is very convenient usually lacks security, and which are the stronger solutions that are out there are not very convenient. So a little bit of background. So in this figure, if you see on the left-hand side, that's the figure of number of mobile devices, including machine-to-machine, that are connected today in the whole world. You can actually go to this website. Shows it's a real-time data. It will show you the number of. If you just Google GSMA intelligence, you can get to this page. So more than 7.5 billion mobile devices. That's more than the human population today. And then the middle one, that is the important one, that is 3.7 billion unique mobile subscribers. That's more than half of the population. And if you couple this with the fact that there's another statistics, that is 3.2 billion people have access to the internet today in this world. And we see that more and more services are going online. In many cases, you have online-only services. So there is, dire need to have a strong solution which is also very convenient to use, which can be used across the world by all people. So GSMA, which is an association of mobile operators, which has more than 800 operators around the world, 250 companies, they thought this as an opportunity, because here, people are carrying that mobile that can be used to identify them. So they came up with Mobile Connect. Now Mobile Connect uses your mobile as your identity. It provides authentication by matching you with your mobile. So using this, you can easily log on to websites without the need of remembering username and passwords. It provides transaction signing, so when you do transfer money from your bank, you can use that. And it provides attribute sharing. Attribute sharing here is your data, your email address, your phone number, your home address. So it provides the user control. So the user has to consent to give out that information to service providers. It's a federated identity service. That means that the identity is provided by a third party. And it's an architecture framework kind which provides various authentication methods underneath, from lower assurance to higher, stronger assurance. But importantly, it's transparent to the user. So the user experience is the same. And it's a standard by GSMA that GSMA came up in Feb 2014. So a little bit on the standards. So Mobile Connect it's a GSMA standard. So GSMA specifies a lot of specification. Very importantly, all these specifications are based on open standards, which are already out there. So they didn't come up, of their own standard and specification, but used the existing ones that are out there. So for service provider, for example, it becomes very easy because they use OpenID Connect and SAML too for federated identity. So the service providers which are already using that, it becomes easy for onboarding those service providers. And
so part of the standards that are, let's say, used by Mobile Connect as part of, let's say, foundation on which Mobile Connect is basing its specification. One of them is relying on what is called level of assurance that's been defined by ISO and NIST standard organization. So the level of assurance is basically 4 different level of assurance or security that are going from 1 to 4, 1 being the lowest, 4 being the highest, and that can be, let's say, applied to different context and different use case for the service provider. So first, let's go a little bit into what are those level of assurance, and then we can see how they can be used in the context of Mobile Connect. So first, level of assurance 1 is just little or no confidence. So that would be typically a cookie stored in your browser, or maybe just checking your IP address. So it gives some information that it's maybe the same user or the same machine or same browser coming to your website, but there's really no guarantee about identity, no authentication or security as per to say. So this one is definitely not being taken into account and addressed by the Mobile Connect solution for authentication part. Then we have level of assurance 2, which is like the one that we know most, the username password, for example. That's the standard, let's say, standard one. It could be also the fact that you have your mobile phone, so it's like a one-factor authentication in some ways. That's what is mainly used for web or mobile commerce application. Yeah. So then we have level of assurance 3. So this is a two-factor authentication. So something you have and something you know. So that will be, for example, a one-time password solution where you log into a website with your credentials and then you have to enter a one-time password into this website from a token that you may have separately. It could be also the fact that on your mobile phone you enter a PIN code, so that will be another way. So it's application-wise, it's for like use case like banking or enterprise where you want to protect, for example, high-value transaction or transfer of funds, or you want to protect some very sensitive data and access to critical infrastructure. And then you have level of assurance 4, which is, let's say, based on the level of assurance 3. With additional, let's say, constraint in terms of storage of key and cryptography, where it is more stringent. For example, you have to, regarding the storage of your cryptographic information needs to be done in some tamper-resistant device. There are some more processes around the management of those cryptographic element and data as well. So those applications are mostly for like e-government and health market. So like, for example, citizens that are able to pay with like a citizen card, their tax and this type of things. So that's for the different level of assurance. So with Mobile Connect, they are addressing level of assurance 2 to 4, because with level 1 there's really not much security and to be done. So now we talk about Mobile Connect. So let me tell you from an end user standpoint, what does that mean? What is it? What is the user experience and what is happening? So on the top left part there, you can see I'm the end user. I'm going to my device to access a website. Let's say I want to access my bank, for example. So I go there on my PC, go to my bank, and there on the website of a bank, we have a traditional login name, password, login page. And in there, we will have an additional button that will be for login with Mobile Connect. Same way that you find today for other, let's say, identity provider or identity federation model like Facebook or Google, you will have that kind of button. Then you'll be prompted onto a next page where you'll be able to enter either your phone number or an identifier. And that, depending on how it's implemented, could be implemented on the service provider, but in most of the cases, that will be implemented in an identity gateway. So the service provider may not be even aware of some personal information, like your phone number. So then that's on the consumption device. So at that point, I enter my phone number or something that will allow the authentication or identity federation to know who I am. And then I will receive on my phone a notification. So there's different types of notification. First, let's say it's a basic access to my website, to a website. I just want to consult some information. I will receive a, do you want to log in to your bank? Yes, no. I'm just on my phone. I just press OK or cancel, and I will be logged in into the website. Now, let's say if it's a more a transaction that requires maybe a little bit more security. So let's say now I want to transfer some money, or I want to log on to my let's say 401k. Then there I may be in the second use case where instead of just being asked to click OK or cancel to authorize the access to my account, this time I would be asked to enter a PIN code on my phone, and then I will be logged in. Same thing on the website. So basically, on one place we have a consumption device where we try to access the service provider information, and on the other, on the bottom part, we have the mobile phone that is used as the authentication device. Okay, so that's kind of for the overall view. So now let's go a little bit into the more detail of end user journey. So as we just see, so first let's look at the level of assurance to the click OK user journey. So that's what we discussed, the service provider page with a traditional login, and then in there we'll have an additional button or whatever for the Mobile Connect option. The user will click on that, will be redirected to an identity gateway or identity federation solution, where he will enter his phone number or some other user identifier. Then we prompted to check his mobile phone. On the mobile phone, receive information. Okay, do you want to enter, login into your account? And this message will be fully configurable by the service provider. So they can put something that is very contextual to what the user is trying to achieve. I click OK, and then I will be logged in into a website I'm trying to access. So in this case, it's my insurance information. In the case of level of assurance 3, so for this case, let's say for something that is a little bit more secure, and this can be also chosen at the service provider level. Depending on what security they require, they can request the different level of assurance that they need. So you could imagine to first log in to a service provider with just clicking OK, and then at the time you want to do a transfer of money, for example, between two accounts, then you'll be asked, for example, to enter the LOA3, like in this case. So same thing, you'll have your standard login page for a service provider. The only thing they need to add is to integrate Mobile Connect additional authentication piece. Same user experience. We are asked to enter a username or a user ID or a phone number. Check on your mobile phone, and on your mobile phone you receive, please enter your personal code to authenticate or perform the transaction. And same thing now, you authenticate into a service provider. So very similar user experience with different level of security. In one case, you just need to click OK to enter, and in the other case, you need to basically enter a PIN code that you will have defined on your Mobile Connect application.
So next we have the attribute sharing experience from the end user perspective. So again, the end user goes to the service provider page, clicks on the Mobile Connect button. Then he's presented with the page to enter his mobile phone, as we've seen before. Check your mobile, then enter your PIN code. And then the identity provider will prompt the user that if you want to share, in this case, your email address, home address, or it can be any other personal information with the service provider. Now, if the service provider clicks, if the user clicks no over here, the authentication will still go through, but when the service provider asks the identity provider for these user attributes, the identity provider will not provide those attributes. If the user clicks yes over here, then he will be logged in, and it's based on OpenID Connect. So what happens is the access token goes to the service provider. The service provider will make a direct call to the identity provider to get these attributes. So here there's two important things to note. One is consent from the user. So user is controlling what information he's sharing with service providers. And in the service provider point of view, the information that is coming, it's vetted. It's coming because, I mean, there has been a previous step that the data that is coming is authentic. So a little bit on the Mobile Connect ecosystem. So over here, if you see on the left-hand side, that's the end user domain. So we have the end user. He has his mobile phone, a SIM card on his mobile phone, and an application which is running on the SIM card. And then we have on the right-hand side, these are the different providers. We have the service provider, then the identity gateway or the identity provider. Then we have the authentication servers, because it supports a wide variety of authentication methods and mechanisms. So the identity provider can integrate with different authentication providers. And then there's the piece of the mobile network operator, which is the OTA and the SMSC connectors. And as we saw before, that the communication between all these components take place through open standards. So the service provider talks to the ID gateway or the identity provider using either OpenID Connect or SAML, which are already being used. So from service provider point of view, it's very easy to start using Mobile Connect. Then from the identity provider to the authentication servers, that's the HC APIs, which are also standard, which some which are already being used out there. And then we have from the authentication servers to the mobile phone, that's again HC and global platform. So one thing to note over here, that when a message is sent from the authentication servers to the mobile phone, it's within a secure channel. Even if this message, SMS, is intercepted on the mobile phone, say by a rogue application, since it is encrypted, it's gibberish, so it cannot be stolen. Only the SIM card and the card application which is running on the SIM card can decrypt this. So it's end-to-end security over here. Okay, so here we see on the left-hand side, so So here we see on the left-hand side, that's the service provider page, and the right-hand side, that's the screen sharing of a mobile device. So on the left-hand side, we saw that the user came and clicked on the mobile connect button, and then he's presented with this page for. Okay. So the user enters his mobile phone over here, clicks on login. Then he's asked to check his mobile, and on the mobile phone, he receives an SMS saying that do you want to log in to that service provider. The user clicks OK, and out of band, the response is sent back to the identity provider, and then from there to the service provider, it's redirected, and the service provider is logged in. So this is the same, but level of assurance where starts with the same. So the user experience is very similar. The user clicks on mobile connect button, enters his phone number, clicks on login. So this time, instead of just an OK button, he'll be asked to enter his PIN. So this is two-factor, what he has, and also a PIN, that what he knows. So that is added level of protection. And then the user clicks OK. Out of band, the response is sent back to the to the identity provider that the authentication was successful, and then the identity provider will redirect to the service provider, and the user is logged in.
Okay, so now that we've seen some example and use cases of Mobile Connect, as well as the user experience, let's talk about some of the challenges of deploying a Mobile Connect. So one of the first challenges is deployment. So Mobile Connect, in fact, is using or can use some applications that are running on a SIM card that is running in the mobile phone. So in order to deploy those applications or to have those SIM cards in mobile phone with Mobile Connect application, there are some either application loading and preparation that needs to be done either in factories for deploying to telecom operators, or that needs to be downloaded over the air through the network of telecom operators. So that's one of the main, one of the first challenges is to make sure that users are deployed and have those Mobile Connect capable application on their device. There are after some ways to mitigate that, because in fact with Mobile Connect the technology underneath is completely hidden for service provider, because as we saw, it's based on level of assurance and not on the technologies that are underneath. So we can there can be usage for service provider of let's say the same level of assurance regardless of the different technologies that can be deployed within a telecom operator or within multiple telecom operators. Then on the second of the challenges is the, let's say, onboarding of service provider slash telecom operator. So it's kind of like the chicken and egg problem. You need to have a lot of service provider to make the service attractive for end user and for them to use them. But at the same time, in order to onboard service provider, you need to have, let's say, a population of end users that can use this service that is wide enough so that it makes sense for service provider to deploy this service. So one good aspect is that those specifications are coming from the GSM Association, which is the association of telecom operators that regroups all of them around the world, and basically they are pushing strongly for that. So from the telecom standpoint operator, that's something that they are pushing in order to have it deployed at countries level at a minimum and worldwide, obviously. And for service provider, what has been in order to mitigate the difficulties of onboarding, that's why GSM Association and the Mobile Connect is using standards like OpenID Connect or SAML that are things that are already existing, that are already deployed for some service provider in order to not have some new proprietary standards coming and to ease basically deployment for service provider, and providing also package and documentation, everything that's required for service provider to be easily onboarded within the solution. Okay, so that's for the main challenges of the deployment of a solution. Now, just to come up with a conclusion. So, as we discussed in the beginning, today when I want to give a phone call, I just take my phone and press a button. Very simple, very easy user experience. In the digital world, it's not yet the case. So what Mobile Connect is bringing is basically the kind of the same type of user experience where you have convenience, but at the same time, you have also security. So with this Mobile Connect solution, service provider will be able, in a consistent manner, and to provide and to use security services for authentication and also signing up user, while having the user being in control of where his credentials are being used and when his information is being shared or not, and to be in control of that. So in some simple words, it's a very simple and consistent user experience across different service providers, regardless of what's the technology underneath. And that's it for.
Anybody have any questions?
Hi, Mike Schwartz from Glue. I had a question about the level of assurance 3 that you mentioned. The NIST guidelines for LOA 3 say that you have to identity proof the person, which means an in-person identity proofing. Level 3 also says that you need to check that the credential shown, like the driver's license or passport, you have to check with the issuer of that credential that it's still valid. So is your framework for authentication going to include mandatory identity proofing requirements? And if not, how can you say it's LOA 3?
Okay, so this from this specification from the Mobile Connect and the GSMA, in the LOA 3 used by the GSMA, so the telecom operators are already going through some identity proofing and vetting of information as part of requesting you as a subscriber to get an account in their premises and so on. So that's one piece. After, there could be some additional mechanisms that can be added, but I believe it was mostly for level of assurance 4, where you have really much more stringent, let's say, government documentation verification for that matter.
So another point on that question. So there's two things over here. One is the registration process, where the user is registered with the service, and the other, which we showed over here, is the usage of the authentication or the usage of the process. Over here, there's no, as you said, validation of the document. But when the user signs up with the service, say for a bank, he goes and registers. At that point, that vetting of his, documents or identity will be done. So once the user is registered,
almost never is that checked with the issuer. So what you're doing is actually at best an LOA 2. I'm just saying, if you're going to say it's LOA 3, then it says that you have to check that it's a validation credential. So if you want to make that assurance to the relying party, you would have to maybe put in your legal framework a requirement that says if you're going to assert this as LOA 3, you actually have to do what it says, which is validate the document.
So then so there are two things over here. The first is that when you register your account at the MNO. not on the service provider, but on the MNO, because the MNO is issuing you the phone. So when you have your identity tied to the SIM which is inside your phone, there is some vetting which is going on over there. So that's one part. The second is that when you look at the LOA which GSMA is proposing and the level of assurance which is coming from NIST, they're two separate things. So the same rules which apply to the LOA 3 of NIST may not apply to what GSMA is saying, because they essentially define their own mechanism of what they treat as LOA 3.
Any more questions?
So what's the level of adoption of this technology right now by the service providers?
So right now the specification, so as Najama said, the specification came out in February 2014. So it's, from a standard standpoint, in this type of world, it's let's say pretty recent. So there are some deployments that are already in place and some that are ongoing. The GSMA Association website, you can have some. You have a list of a few countries that already has deployed some solution around Mobile Connect or similar solutions. There are some other topics, like some other ongoing deployment. I can't really talk about it in public, but there are some very strong push from the GSM Association to deploy that. And what we see is that per countries, telecom operators are getting together to provide this type of solutions.
I have questions about LOA also, but I'll circle back because I come from a NIST background and with LOA 4 you show up in person, but that's another one. But my real question is about SIM swap fraud that doesn't happen so much here in the US, but in other countries, and how do you prevent SIM swap fraud?
Okay, so yes, so in the case of SIM swap, so when you register for Mobile Connect at your telecom operator, as we didn't went into the detail, but there is a registration process where some credentials are going to be installed on your SIM card application, or they will have been done already in factories. So when you do a SIM swap, at that point, your telecom operator is going to be aware of a SIM swap. So the Mobile Connect that you're registered for at your telecom operator, they will know that now you've done a SIM swap, so you have a different SIM card on your phone associated with your phone number. And the credentials that you had previously are not valid anymore, will be discarded, and you will have to either re-register again to your telecom operator in order to re-enter, for example, the PIN code that is used for the level of assurance 3. And there's also could be, depending on service provider or some use cases, it's up to each service provider or telecom operator how they want to implement that, but a way to automatically deregister you from those certain, let's say, specific service provider. Let's say there are some very secure service providers that want to make sure that this type of event trigger unregistration or unlinking, let's say, of your Mobile Connect account with them, that these kind of things are also part of it. Today, in the GSMA specification, in Mobile Connect specification, they have specified that, yes, SIM swap is part of the lifecycle use case. They have not gone yet into the detail of how they want to manage it. Today, they talk about unregistering a user and having the user register himself again. It's still a working in progress for this specification. They are still working on those parts.
So what's the business model for this? Who's going to pay? The RPs, the service providers? How does this whole, why would a service provider deploy this?
So the business model, I think, would be varying depending on probably countries and also types of service provider. So today, business model may be that either in some countries the end user will pay for it, or could be service provider paying also for the service. It depends what is, let's say, each service provider looking at. For some service provider, they want to provide additional securities, but they want their end user to pay for it. for some other service provider. They value the attributes or the personal information they can get, or the simplification of registration they can obtain from getting, let's say, kind of vetted personal information from the telecom operator. In that case, the service provider will be the one paying for it. So there's not one business model that fits all the scheme.
But in general, the service provider is going to get money from either the art from the website or from the consumer. So it's a revenue stream to the telecom operator.
Yes, and to the service provider as well. Depending. I mean, in this case, the RP and the service provider is the same.
Does this have any dependency on the eSIM initiative?
So in fact, this mobile connect application can be deployed on various, let's say, SIM, eSIM, or secure elements that can be on a mobile phone.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
More questions? More questions? All right, let's give more.
Thanks.